And over the next decade, China's nuclear warhead stockpile, estimated to be in the 200s last year, is projected to reach between 700 and 1,000 warheads. And every major city in Australia, including Hobart, is within range of China's missiles. Well, back to the Solomon Islands. Why the China focus, and why should we be concerned? Well, China have established 20 outposts in the South China Sea. They've rejected The Hague's permanent Court of Arbitration verdict in 2016 on their claims to the historic rights in the South China Sea. In other words, their claims were rejected by The Hague, but China ignored the ruling. As I've said before on this program, they've used militia-crewed fishing vessels to intrude into the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. They've imposed a national security law on Hong Kong, doing away with the commitment of one country, two systems. And as you know, they've inflicted tariff bans on Australian imports: barley, beef, coal, lamb, lobster, timber and wine. And China have issued a dossier of 14 disputes with Australia, with which Australia, and they're suggesting that we should refrain from doing anything which actually is in our own interests. So, the Solomon Islands are just the latest step in a long march by China. As Greg Sheridan told me at the time some months ago, quote, "The signing of the China-Solomon Islands Security Treaty is a very bad day for Australia, the worst day for our national security since the end of the Vietnam War." Greg said, "There is no doubt that this is an epic failure of Australian policy," unquote. Solomon Islands government says the agreement won't lead to a Chinese military base, but what are the Chinese assurances worth? History needs to inform us. The Solomon Islands were regarded in World War II as the clutch point in the Pacific. It was where, in World War II, the Allies lined up against Japan at the biggest of the Solomon Islands, Guadalcanal. But Washington hasn't had an embassy in the Solomon Islands for nearly 30 years. Wouldn't that be a start? Re-establish an embassy. Beware, the problem worsens, which is one of the reasons I'm talking about this to you tonight. Watch the political alliances around Labor. The Greens argue that China doesn't pose a threat to Australia, and they have no problem with the Solomon Islands' decision to form a security partnership with Beijing. The Greens want our military spending, which until recently has been totally inadequate. They want it to be slashed. The AUKUS agreement they want cancelled. They want Australia's nuclear submarine program to be axed. They want Pine Gap to be closed and the US Marines out of Darwin. That's the Greens. Their 27-year-old peace and disarmament spokesperson, Jordan Steele John, 27, he's been in the Senate for 5 years, do you mind, is on the record as saying, and I quote, "I don't see China as a military threat to Australia," unquote. That Australia should butt out of affairs of the Pacific states, and that outfits like the Solomon Islands should be free to, quote, "defend their territorial boundaries and build relationships," unquote. The final postscript. On May 21 this year, 12.2% of Australians gave their vote to the Greens, 1.8 million voters. We ask politicians to do their homework in relation to the Solomon Islands in the Pacific and criticise them because they haven't. Is it too much to ask the voter to do some homework about the Greens as well?